films about people who rescued Jews during the war, and they're always just very much like, that's what you do. Didn't really occur to them to do anything different. And the fact that so many Roman Jews survived is pretty amazing. I have to say, I was a little shocked to see that Rome was liberated in June of 1944, because my mother was taken to Auschwitz in 44 and didn't get out until 45, much later, like over a year later. So like they're being liberated and people in France are being deported. So, does anybody want to make a comment or ask a question? Yeah, Christine, wait, let me bring you the microphone because they can't hear you on Zoom otherwise. It's just the way the system is set up.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that in Venice, which had a communist mayor and city council and so on, they refused to turn over any Jews. And Venice, in Venezia. And to this day, they have utter contempt for that pope. And also the one later on, the one they called the Nazi, was before this guy, who's a good guy. But a lot of those popes repressed the orders within the Catholic Church that had very active anti-fascist efforts. So they were subject to a dual oppression.
Anybody else want to make any comments? I mean, I just really, wonder if I were in that situation, would I be able to resist that kind of torture? I mean, the guy said he still had a hole in his side, and he lived to be almost 100. But, putting up with that kind of torture, I mean, they didn't show the worst of it, I'm sure. So, I mean, the idea that you could resist that is pretty incredible, right? So I think that was very uplifting, ultimately, to know that there are people out there who are decent, and there are decent people out there. Okay, I would like to now introduce Cantor Bob. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Christina Miller, who is going to perform a play, and we're very fortunate to have her. She is not a professional actress, as I said before. She's been doing this sort of as an avocation, but I think you'll agree that she's quite good at it. It's called Sarah Plays Her Games, or something like, right?
Yeah, Sarah Plays Her Game.
Okay, and I'm going to get out of the way.
This monologue is very much about. Okay. Oh, wait. Oh, okay. Let me take mine. I think it will work now. Yeah. I think it's working right now. Okay. This monologue is very much about some of the things you saw in the movie also, because I recognized it's about an 8-year-old little girl in a big city in Paris, and the Catholic religion is involved in this too. So you'll hear some reinforcement of what you see in this here. The monologue is by Madame Sarah Joel, and she's an elderly lady who was born in Paris in 1935, and she ended up in the United States, and she is now a language teacher at the Berlitz Language School. And so during one of her classes, she reminisces about a game that she played when she was a young girl in Paris during World War II. And this monologue was written by Frank Canino, and it won an international award. So, bonsoir, madame and monsieur, comment ça va? We begin our lesson tonight, and we begin with Dieu. Dieu. No, not Jew. Not Jew. A Jew is a member of the Hebrew family, like me. Je suis juive. I'm Jewish. The word Dieu pronounced, put your lips like this, Dieu, and it means game in Paris. Tennis, hockey, love. And for me, it has a special meaning that I learned as a young child during the war. Oh, believe me, my life was wonderful then. Living behind my father's shop on the Rue Saint-Séverin, Richard, Joël, Antiquité. My father was an artist who made picture frames and sold antiques. I grew up with so much beauty around me. My father's paintings, statues, portraits, and my mother, Leah. She sang operetta while she flirted with the customers in the shop, which drove Papa mad. They were always quarreling when they were not making love or singing or painting. But above all, when I was only 8 years old, there was a special game. You leave the house through the back door and to go to the metro. And you turn right on Rue Saint-Séverin, you turn left onto Rue Raharpe, and then right again to the Place Saint-Michel. And there he was, Saint-Michel, the beautiful angel, flying above the fountain, sword in his right arm. And you go down, pay your fare, you go down into the metro, go down the long, long staircase, go through so many tunnels and so many ways where you can go wrong and where you can get lost. But I know how to read the signs. And behind me, my papa said, be patient with yourself, Sarah. Be quiet, because you can only win this game if you know the rules. And if you keep your head. And it cannot be too easy, because otherwise there's no fun, there's no adventure. Always he is behind me. How do you say? Coaching, always encouraging me. Listen, Sarah, the game has to be a little dangerous, because otherwise there's no suspense, there's no fun. But little did I know how dangerous this game really was. Okay. I always had to be ready to play the game. My coat hung by the door with my smock and the rosary in its pocket, and my backpack with my school books, and a little crucifix to hang around my neck, and my papers with my picture and my new name. Every other day, we practiced our game, Papa and me. Someday, you'll have to be able to do it all by yourself, my Sarah, he would say, without Papa behind you to remind you of everything. When the train stops, remember, push down the door level firmly and step carefully onto the platform. And then look for the signs to the Porte de Clignancourt. Oh, so many things to remember. And if you forget, you lose the game. But Papa is always encouraging me. And when I make no mistakes on the long journey, he rewards me with my favorite patisserie, a huge gleamy Napoleon, just for me. I was a very greedy little girl. And then one day, I'm helping Papa cut vegetables for dinner. And Mama is in the shop, waiting on a customer, when we hear new voices. Men with German accents. And Papa gets up and walks to the door of the shop, and then turns abruptly and says, Sarah, it's time to play the game. And he hands me my coat and my frock, my smock, and he hangs the crucifix around my neck. And he said, Sarah, we have to start right now if you want to win the game. And he opens the door and carefully, slightly pushes me out. And when I turn to wave at him, he has closed the door already. So now I must play all by myself. And Saint Michel is looking at me as I go down into the metro. And I give my coin to the lady behind the wicket. And I get my train to the Louvre, my first train to the Louvre. And when the train stops, I push down the door level firmly, and I step carefully onto the platform, and I go up the stairs, and I go through the many tunnels to catch my next train. I am winning. All is going well with my game. I am doing everything perfectly. But when I stand on the platform, waiting for the next train, I hear a man's voice. "Where are you going all alone, my child?" Oh, he speaks very good French. But I hear his accent and I see his uniform. "What's your name, little Fraulein?" "Marie-Louise, monsieur." "Your family name?" "Sauvignac." "How come you're not in school already?" And for this one, I was prepared. "My grandmama is sick, and I went to visit her, and now I'm on my way back to the Notre Dame des Anges." "Are you a day student there?" "No, monsieur, I board there." "What's your grandmother's name?" And for a moment I'm caught. Papa had not prepared me for this one. But instantly I know it's a trap. And I answer, "Madame Constance de Sauvignac, monsieur, originally from Marseille." And he looks down at my smiling face, and he looks at the crucifix around my neck, and he is convinced. He even smiles as he motions for me to continue my journey. Oh, my heart races so fast when I go into my train. And then when the train stops and I get out, I run up the stairs, and I run down the street, and I knock so hard on the door, which Sister Soria opens with such a smile on her face when I say, Master, I have won my game." So 2 years in a convent with nuns who were very strict, but also affectionate. Because we knew every day that if we were caught, we would all die, and the nuns with us. Ever since then, I have believed in God's grace, which kept us alive and sometimes happy. Ah, que la vie est étonnante, how astonishing life is. Believe me, mon cher, there are no problems in life after you have survived the Nazis. As did both my parents. We were luckier than most. And in May 1945, we opened our new shop, and Mama still flirting with the customers, and Papa still getting jealous. And I had all the creamy Napoleons I could get. So you see, there are many games to live in this life. And I won my best game when I was very young. However, there's only one way to pronounce the word Dieu correctly en français. Pucker your lips as if to kiss me. Je. Ah oui, très bien, magnifique. Thank you. Thank you.
Christina.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your passion in that beautiful little story.
I would like to thank you to give me the opportunity to do this, because when I read the script first, I cried every time I read it, because especially the sentence where they say he opened the door and gently pushes me out. Just imagine you have to push your child into the world to save it.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing.
So
Thank you.
I don't know, maybe people have some questions for Christina?
Oh.
If you, maybe? Or comments?
Well, I'll be happy to answer questions. I felt very strongly about this because I was born in the Netherlands in 1942, right smack in the middle of World War II. So I don't remember too much personally, but I know from family members. And what we saw in the film was very much happening all over Western Europe. And Suzanne and I know some other people of you know that already, but it affects me very strongly to think that I could have been that girl in the play. And when I see the anti-Semitism that has been growing the last few years, I get very upset. And I just feel I want to do something about it. And I know this way I'm preaching to the choir, but...
Sorry, that was just a sound, something. I don't know what that was, but...
Okay, but I would love to do this for younger people, and so they will know about the horrors of the war.
I have to say, I am, every year I am more and more disappointed by the fact that the people who come to Yom HaShoah are all at least 40 or 50 and over, and that the young people are not coming to learn about this every single year. The only year that was different was when Mati taught the Holocaust class for the older kids, and she had them perform something, and that may be the trick for the future, is have them be involved, because I don't know why they don't come. I mean, I'm glad you're all here, but it's also important for the next generation. Christine, hang on just one second. Not you, there's several Christines here.
The only thing that gives me hope is that there are more and more university classes on genocide, on the Holocaust, on survival, on in the sense of resilience, on being a people in diaspora. All of those lessons, they are being taught, and so younger people are getting some kind of message, because look at their activism.
Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, in Germany, they're facing this, but the fact is that if you go out there and interview people and ask them what Auschwitz is, they don't know. Okay, that's really, or they don't believe it. And Ruth, I know you had the experience of having your parents send you away, so you can really relate to this piece by Christina. Do you want, here, maybe you can say a couple things, since it's really kind of your story also.
No, Christine, that was absolutely beautiful. And of course, I do remember it because we were in Europe when the Nazis invaded. And through my mother and my father, I was able to get out just 2 weeks before the war. But we were in London, and during the war, they sent us to the country. And actually, they wanted to send me to America, to my uncle, on a children's transport. And my father said, no, the family's staying together. And that ship was torpedoed by the Germans, and all the children, most of them perished. So the fact, this brings, being pushed out and being taken care of by your parents, I'm eternally grateful and very positive that the world is going to get better.
We need the positivity. Oh, Susie?
from Germany instead of Rome, we went to Milan. We were there for 3 years until Mussolini and Hitler became friends. And then all foreign Jews had to leave. We went to Holland. We weren't let in. From Holland, we went to France, where we lived underground till the end of the war. But I had a physical because my parents wanted to send me with a group of children from Marseille to Israel. But the Vichy government, in the meantime, occupied that city, and otherwise I probably wouldn't have been with my parents any longer.
Be an Israeli.
Yeah.
Thank you. So why don't we take a 5-minute break? It's what is everybody? 8:40? 8:47? So like at 10 of. Let's come back at 10 of. So if you need a bathroom break or whatever, and we'll do the service in about 7 minutes.
It's pretty hot, but it's okay. Ani maamin, be'emunah shelema, beviat HaMashiach, beviat HaMashiach ani מאמין, ואף על פי שיתמהמה, אני אחכה לו. You adjusted it somehow. Hello, Christine. Well, I'm going to just...
Jordy's not there, so that's... Okay, are we ready? Okay, we're gonna get started with our service. So we're going to begin on page 75. We begin with silence. The silence of death, the silence of life. The silence after destruction, the silence before creation. There are times when songs falter, when darkness fills life, when martyrdom becomes a constellation of faith against the unrelieved black of space about us. There are no words to reach beyond the edge of night, no messengers to tell the full tale. There is only silence. The silence of Job, the silence of the 6 million, the silence of memory. Let us remember them as we link our silences into the silence which becomes a prayer, which links us with the past, touching that darkness we cannot fully enter, the anguish which is memory and love and life and death. Christine?
Silence leads to memories. Memories become words. Words become images. The world of Eastern Europe rises before us, thousands upon thousands of little children learning Torah, homes in which the Sabbath candles burned, streets where walkers argued points of law and where the outside world was far away. There was poverty and lack of vision, too. But there was a depth and a greatness which we have no longer, and we weep for what is lost. And there was Western Europe, where Jewish life had flowered into a golden period of creativity. Scholars, poets, merchants, artists, and musicians joined ancient and modern visions in a joyous celebration of life. The world had a special glow, and genius resided within that jury. Then creation was followed by destruction. There was a Sephardic world as well, a pious culture, a quiet and enduring way of Jewish life, 1,000 years of scholarship, of family life and joy. In Athens and Salonika, in the Mela and on the Isles of the Mediterranean, Jews prayed to God and trusted their neighbors, and that world also ceased. Darkness covered the Jewish world. Fire burned the books and the buildings. Night and fog swallowed up the people on their way to death. We weep for them, we yearn for them now. We reach toward them through the stories of lives by reciting names. Chava, Sarah, Ezekiel, Yehuda. Their names, their lives are intertwined with ours. They are a part of our collective memories of our history, the Warsaw Ghetto alongside the walls of Jerusalem, the musicians of Auschwitz and the still harps at the waters of Babylon, the murdered temple singers and the children of Terezin. They speak to us softly from Baba Yar and from the transports.
And I'd like to call up Susie Copel for the first candle, please.
I light this candle for my grandparents on both sides, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, for my wonderful parents, especially my father, who kept us a step away from the concentration camp. He joined the French army and fought in the French underground. And my wonderful husband, who put up with years of my migraines and depressions, and all the 6 million who perished in the camps, and those gypsies and gay people and whoever collaborated with the Jews were sent to the camps also. And last but not least, to the French people who took us in to their homes to save our lives at their own risk of being caught. That's the only reason I'm here today.
Sandy Nelson is going to read.
Written in pencil on the sealed railway car. Here in this carload I, Eve, with Abel, my son. If you see my other son, Cain, son of man, tell him I...
Okay, so please read responsively with Sandy.
Silence, only silence. Oh, okay. Waiting for our reply. All of them waiting. 3,300,000 Jews lived in Poland before the war. 2,850,000 Jews lived in Russia. More than 1 million died. 1.5 million Jews lived in the Balkans and Slavic countries. More than 1 million died. Germany, Austria, France, and Italy had 650,000 Jews. Rhodes and Cyprus had happy, thriving congregations. Our brothers and sisters were murdered everywhere in the days of destruction. They died in the night and the fog. They died between dawn and dusk. They died by fire and water, by poison and gun. They died alone, but we will not forget them. We will remember them in reverence and in silence.
Sorgen nicht kein Ballast, du gehst dem letzten Weg. Bei Himmeln bleien, verstehe bleie Tag. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Schau. Es wird ab heute unser Trott mit seinen da. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Schau. Es wird ab heute unser Trott mit seinen da. Von grünen Palmenland bis weite Land von Schnee. Wir kommen an mit unser Pein, mit unser Fee. Wo gefallen sitzt, zerspritzt von unser Blut. Schwarzen wird unser Grube, unser Mut. Wo gefallen sitzt, zerspritzt von unser Blut. Schwarzen wird unser Grube, unser Mut.
Christine Gailey, page 80.
They fought and they died. The individuals, the communities. Far, far a city lies, body is still warm. Bells are ringing. You have not seen a city thrust on its back like a horse in its blood, jerking its hooves, unable to rise. Bells are ringing. City, city, how mourn a city whose people are dead and whose dead are alive in the heart. Bells. This is from Abba Hofner, my little sister.
And I'd like to call Ruth Geller for the second candle, please. You take your mask off.
I remember my grandparents, my aunts, uncles, cousins, who actually were in Krakow, Poland, in the Krakow ghetto, and then in many of the concentration camps, and were killed. I do remember at the tender age of 5, I was born in, well, I wasn't born at 5, but I was born in Czechoslovakia, Sudetenland, and at the age of 5, the Germans marched in. I'll never forget the sign with the Mercedes-Benz and the Heil Hitler. And I had been in school. My father was in London on business. He was a successful businessman, and we had traveled everywhere. But he couldn't come back, and we couldn't leave. And then my grandfather was actually dying of cancer in Krakow, and my mother, who was the most incredible person I've ever known, was able to talk the Germans into letting us go to Krakow. And we went on a train. It was a short ride from the Sudetenland. And she sat Shiva for 7 days. And that was in 1939. And then knew what was going to happen after what had happened in Czechoslovakia. And she wanted to take my cousins with her. But they said, no, you know. He's got Austria, he's got Czechoslovakia, that's it. And so she just took my brother and me, and we traveled through Poland to a port called Gdansk, or Gdynia. And sometimes it was German, the country, and sometimes it was Polish. And we did get on a ship, a very rough trip. But we made it to London. My father was in the hospital with a heart attack. But we were in London during the Blitz, and I'm so grateful to be here today and to be in this wonderful community. And I just wish that we would have more young people. And tomorrow, Susie and I actually will be speaking to students at UCR. Hopefully, there'll be some young people there.
There we go. Thank you. Ezra, are you going to read remotely?
I am. Pardon my voice. I'm still recovering here.
Okay.
Reports, letters to the living from those who fought in the ghettos and in the forests. Abba Kovner had led his people in the Vilna ghetto and in the partisan woods, and the fight for his people continued in the land of Israel. Others sent letters to God and brought them to him in person. Poets cried out their anguish, and the empty land shook in pain. Across that landscape, iron rails gave mute testimony of trains which had passed over it, of carriages seen by everyone and by no one.
Thank you. Let's please confess. Now, as wagons you roll on and see the pain, madness reverberates. Mute witnesses, you know the needs and pain of every terror night. You know what happens. Confess, mute ones, where you roll, for it is death you serve. My people, my Jewish people, where have you taken them? Blinded by our tears, we cannot see. Blinded by our grief, we cannot believe. But beyond grief, beyond belief, gently, gently, there is the whisper of a night song, of an affirmation, which could not be slain. And before Anima Amim, I'd like to call up Lori Magnus for candle number 3.
Should I light the candle first? I light this candle in memory for my husband, Bernd Magnus, who died almost 8 years ago. He was a child during the Holocaust. He was with his mother and his sister. He was a child, and he didn't remember what it was like to have normal life. I also light it in memory of his grandparents, Clara and Arthur, who went to the grave and with the Germans as Moisius Magnus, and for my husband's aunt, Johanna Magnus. Those 3 people died one died in Lodz and the other 2 died in Minsk, I think, or it might be the other way around. And I light it in honor of my husband's half-brother Heinz, who was drafted into the German army and died in the Battle of Stalingrad. And I light it in memory of
my sister-in-law and her husband, who was in Shanghai during the time of Holocaust, and also for my mother and father-in-law. My father-in-law worked for the Salomon Brothers Leather Company. He was a hide expert. Apparently one time he was called to testify at The Hague periodically about hides when there was a dispute about what they were worth. And he spent the war, the duration of the war in Santo Domingo, because they obviously weren't letting German nationals into the United States. And one time when my husband spoke about his experiences in the Holocaust, two men stayed and talked to us. They had known my father-in-law in Santo Domingo, and he said they called him the Meshuggah. He made his living by carrying whole rows of cheese across the island. Well, that's how he survived. And also in the memory of the 6 million.
באמונה שלמה, באמונה שלמה, בביאת המשיח, בביאת המשיח, אני מאמין, ואף אבי שיתממש בביאת המשיח, אני מאמין, אני מאמין, אני מאמין, אני מאמין.
Ani Ma'amin, Abraham. Despite Treblinka, Ani Ma'amin, Isaac. Because of Belson, Ani Ma'amin, Jacob. Because and in spite of Majdanek. Whether the Messiah comes, Ani Ma'amin, or is late in coming, Ani Ma'amin. Whether God is silent or weeps, Ani Ma'amin. Blessed are the fools who shout their faith. Blessed are the fools who go on laughing, who mock the man who mocks the Jew, who help their brothers, singing over and over and over.
אני מאמין בביאת המשיח, ואף על פי שיתמהמה, אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא. אני מאמין.
Our belief will lead us from the destruction to the creation. Our unbelief will guard us against complacency, against forgetting. Will challenge our idolatry of little gods. A psalm by Paul Celan. Our belief will lead us from the destruction to the creation. Our unbelief will guard us against complacency, against forgetting. Will challenge our idolatry of little gods. And I'd like to invite up Judy and Rusty to light candle number 4.
We light this candle in memory of other Holocaust survivors who are members of Temple Bethel and are no longer with us. Lucy Ashwall, Ruth Caron, Jenny Farber, Rita Granada, Ermi Tilton, and Sarah Wall.
And as Rusty's going back to his seat, I want to thank him for organizing the readings for tonight. And I want to thank Jory Armoff, who has done incredible tech work that took many, many hours today. And of course, Cantor Bob. Joan Schneider, would you come up and read, please?
A psalm by Paul Celan. A nothing were we, are we, will we remain, flowering, the nothing, the no one's rose. The mystery of the Ein Sof, of the God who is near and who is far, who may at times be absent, is always with us. It has been said, when God's back is toward man, history is Auschwitz. Yet in every age, there are those who still reached out to God, the mothers of Israel protecting their children, the fathers pleading with God, the Rav of Slobodka, the girls of the ghetto, the steadfastness of teachers in the camps is Israel, wrestling with God in darkness and prevailing.
Cantor Bob is going to light the 5th candle.
Many of you have heard me over the years speak about my mother and my 2 aunts. The story of three different stories. My mother was able to escape from, not really escape, but she was transported to England and came over here on the Queen Mary just before the Blitzkrieg. So she led a relatively sedate life here, though she was very unhappy with her living circumstances. But her 2 sisters each experienced something completely different. One sister, my Aunt Sylvia, was on a train to Auschwitz. She luckily survived Auschwitz and had suffered every single night of her life with nightmares. There wasn't a night that went by without a nightmare. My other aunt was rescued by her parents, my grandfather and grandmother. I've spoken about this before. They were hiding out in an abandoned barn and in a cellar, which there was a sub-cellar. And they told my youngest aunt to stay in there no matter what happens. So they freely gave themselves up to the Germans. The Germans took them right outside of the barn, shot them dead on the spot. And my aunt escaped, became part of the partisans, met my uncle Zorach, and they lived a very long life in Israel. However, she also suffered nightmares every single night of her life as well. But what I have not spoken about is my grandfather, who was one of 4 boys. 2 of them, or one of them, came out in the early 30s and had a very successful real estate business in Los Angeles. But the other 3 weren't that lucky. One escaped and went to England and fought for the English army in World War II. And as I told you, one of the grandfathers was shot dead, and it's outside the barn. The other was part of a family of 6. He and his wife, 4 wonderful children, as my mother would recount. They were in their home city. The Germans came, and they marched everybody out in the center of the city, and trucks would come and take probably 20 or 30. The trucks would leave. The trucks would come back empty. And right before my aunt, who survived Auschwitz, she was young, she wasn't necessarily taken, but she did not have a pair of shoes. And so my great aunt, who knew what was coming, took off her shoes and gave it to my aunt so she would have a decent pair of shoes to use. Well, unfortunately, she was carted off to Auschwitz. So I light this 5th candle in memory of those who perished and the ones who survived, who are now not with us. And maybe next year I will tell you the story that I just learned about a few months ago of the cantor who was my mentor, and how he survived and escaped from Germany in an amazing set of circumstances. And the reason I know this is because the new cantor of Congregation B'nai Israel in Tustin did her thesis to become a rabbi, or to become a cantor, of his life. And she sent me the thesis, she sent me some videos, and my jaw dropped because I did not know a lot of what had happened. So, again, the 5th candle is my mentor, Cantor Philip Modell, who, without his incredible ruach, his spirit and encouragement, a big part of my life wouldn't be happening right now.
Jason, we're on the bottom of page 83.
A liturgical meditation of our time. When Leo Beck came out of the black midnight of the concentration camp, he looked about at the world and at his neighbors. Many averted their eyes. They had been silent. They had been selfish, or they had followed the multitude to do evil. In the darkness of the camps, Leo Beck had not despaired. He had fulfilled his function. He had taught and he had given comfort. And in the darkness of the new world, which had to live with the memory of Belsen and Auschwitz, Beck continued to teach and to comfort his people. They say that when Beck lifted his hands and spoke the priestly benediction, the congregation felt very close to the divine presence. May the Lord look kindly upon you and be gracious to you. Those words took on new meaning for the worshipers. In ancient times, the image of one Babylonian god was a clay furnace. When the fires of human sacrifice burned high, the eyes of the idol glared death upon the onlookers. To see God was to die. Biblical Israel transformed the terror into awe, and fear became love. In God's light, we saw light. But in our days, the world grew dark again. The pagan furnace roared, and Israel ascended into the sky as smoke. And we who are alive wander across a darkened landscape, fitfully illuminated by burning idols, in which some exterminate their human kin. We need our teachers, those who died for the sanctification of the divine name, and those who lived to guide and comfort us. They tell us that the encounter with God can take place in the utmost darkness, if we are ready for it. The blessing that shone through Leo Beck can touch our lives. May God look upon us and give us peace.
I'm lighting the 6th candle in memory of my mother, Nicole Silberkleit, née Bernheim, who it just so happens yesterday was the 20th anniversary of her death. She was also in Auschwitz for a year and a half. She was French and grew up in Strasbourg, and the family went down to Nice in southern France during the war. And interestingly, having seen this film about Italians, the Italians were not as awful as the Germans. And they, even though they were in control of the southern part of France, they did not ship Jews off. But then the Germans came in, and her family was denounced by some neighbors, and she lost everybody except one aunt who had moved to the States and one uncle who had been living in Switzerland. He was one of 9, and the aunt in the States was one of 4. Interestingly enough, and it's like all these strange coincidences sort of coming together, like I mentioned that my mother died right before I was ordained, and then I'm about to retire, and it's the 20th anniversary of her death. The Torah portion is the same Torah portion as the one that I was part of that inspired me to eventually become a rabbi. So Cantor Bob's aunt was in Auschwitz at the same time as my mother, and they both worked in this place called Canada, which is where they would sort through the clothing of the people who were being killed. So they probably knew each other. And what are the odds that we're going to end up on the same bima? But that's how my mother survived, because people would sew things into the lining of their clothing, and they would have either, money or jewelry or something like that, and she was able to trade it with the guards, which is really bizarre, because why wouldn't the guards just take the money or their jewelry and say, thank you? Instead of which they traded for more food. So she was able to eat a little bit more. She also found some capsules of calcium that she said really helped her as well. But of course, she was traumatized for the rest of her life. I mean, there's no way that she wasn't. And then it gets passed on to her children and her grandchildren, unfortunately. And then we struggle to deal with that. So in memory of all those who perished, who have no one to remember them, who also people who survived and had children and grandchildren who are dealing with the trauma still, and for all the genocidal victims around the world, it hasn't stopped. We say never again, but it's unfortunately the other side of human nature. We saw the best of human nature in the film, of people willing to risk their lives to save people they don't even know, and people who've saved some of the lives here. And then we have the other side of the coin. We have, the horror and the cruelty that is also part of who we are as human beings, very unfortunately. So I hope never again, but I'm going to assume the best, because Ruth is positive about the future, and so I am going to try to be positive too.
Hashivenu, Hashivenu, Adonai Elecha, V'nashuva, Chadesh, Chadesh, Yameinu Kekedem, Hashivenu, Hashivenu, Adonai Elecha, V'nashuva, Chadesh, Chadesh, Yameinu Kekedem.
Please join me on the bottom of page 84. Return us, O God, to our task and to our people. Renew our days as of old. Bring back the time of creation. Return us to our neighbors, to those who have suffered with us, to those who still live in darkness, to those who need our help. Return us and renew us. All of life is return and renewal, is creation after destruction. Akiva walked along the Temple Mount and saw the jackals playing among the ruins, and he sensed a divine plan of darkness and light, of a land to be restored, of a people to be returned to God. Our survivors belong to the company of Akiva. We honor and revere them. We are their students. How can we feel what they feel? How can we know what they know? All we can do is take their silence, and we can take their words and interweave past and present, present and future, and we can pray and hope. Please rise for El Malei Rachamim.
El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hametzei Menucha Nechona, Hametzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanafei HaShechina, Bemalot Kedoshim U'Tohorim, Kezohar Rakia Mazirim, Lenishemot 6,000,000 Acheinu V'Achyoteinu, Shemetu al Kodesh Hashem, Yanuchu v'shalva v'shalom, Shelo yadu b'chayeichem. Ba'al harachamim hastirem, b'seter kenafecha le'olamim. Otzra b'tzra chaim, et nishmatam, Adonai hu nachalatam. V'yanuchu b'shalom al mishkavam v'nomar Amen.
Please join me in reading the English on the top of page 86. God, full of compassion, whose presence is over us, may the souls of our 6 million dead who have gone to their everlasting home with the holy and pure on high, who shine as the lights of heaven, find the safety and rest denied them on earth beneath the shelter of your presence. Master of mercy, cover them in the shelter of your wings forever, and bind their souls into the gatherings of life. It is the Lord who is their heritage. May they be at peace in their place of rest. Amen. Creation follows destruction, and destruction follows creation. We lit 6 candles tonight to commemorate our dead. Soon, these candles will flicker and die and return to darkness. Soon we begin to forget, and we must not let this happen. Let us kindle one more light, a yahrzeit candle to which we return each season. And let us recite the prayer of praise, which the poet intertwined with the memory of suffering. Let us say Kaddish.
Not yet. Not yet.
Hang on. And you are all invited to take a candle out there as well. Yikadal.
Lords,
V'yikadash.
Gurs,
Shemei Rabbah.
Vorsa,
Be'alma divrach Yehutei.
Bogdanovka,
V'yamlich malchutei.
Ravensbrück,
B'chayachon uv'yomechon.
Vilna,
Uv'chayedechol Beit Yisrael.
Treblinka,
Ba'agala uv'zman kariv.
Chalmno,
V'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach.
Belzec,
V'yitpar v'yitromam.
Buchenwald,
V'yitnaseh v'yithadar.
Sobibor,
V'yitaleh v'yithalal.
Majdanek,
Shemei dekudashah b'rechu.
Mauthausen,
Le'ela.
Babiyar,
Mikol birchata v'shirata,
Bergen-Belsen,
Tushbachata v'nechemata,
Dachau,
Da'amiran be'alma,
Auschwitz,
Imru, Amen. Together, Yehei
Shlama
Shlama
Rabba
Rabba
Min
Min
Shemaya,
Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Huya Aseh Shalom, Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen. Amen ve'amen. The service has finished and our task has begun. Quietly, let us go home.